lot of people find the word economics to be repellent. They're just repelled by that word, like, don't want to hear about it. But I would say mostly because they haven't discovered what is relevant for them in their lives about the economy. NPR produces a show that you may have heard of. It's massive. It is called Planet Money. And it has endeavored for years, for like 15 years, to make the connection and shift people from being repelled to being engaged because they understand the relevance of the economy to their lives. They now have a book. And we're going to talk to the author of the book. I know it's a collaborative effort, but still, someone gets the byline here. Alex Mayyasi is a longtime contributor to the podcast. He is also the host of the podcast Gastronomics, and he joins us today to talk about Planet Money, a guide to the economic forces that shape your life. He's in Boulder, Colorado. Hello, Alex.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. This book builds on a very, very successful podcast that's been around since the financial crisis. How would you, for those people who don't know it, how would you sum up Planet Money?
I think there are a few ways. One is maybe if someone was explaining the economy to you, but it was, a friend at a bar. So some more casual, relatable, not trying to impress you by using lots of jargon to seem smart, but instead just trying to explain it in a friendly way. And I think as well, Planet Money really uses a lot of storytelling in our episodes. So we're often looking for kind of characters or people who are at the center of, the economic headlines, whether that's tariffs or inflation or something else, or, otherwise finding people who are really kind of like grappling with decisions in a way that makes economics that can sometimes be a bit abstract, very, very concrete and relatable.
What was your personal gateway drug on economics? Were you always someone who was interested in it, or did you have to confront your own issues about the topic and the word and the relevance in your life?
It's funny. I've both long been interested, but I have to admit, I hope my high school economics teacher is not listening right now, because when I was taking economics in high school, I was also a small town volunteer firefighter department. So I was a volunteer firefighter, more like an assistant than a real volunteer firefighter. But if I heard the fire horn go off, I could run out of any class or practice to go, help with the fire, help with the emergency call. And I admit there were times in economics classes where I kind of very much hoped I would hear the horn go off, and I'd be like, just a small brush fire, no chance of
Right.
anyone getting injured or any property damage. They just need us to go out there.
And this
And
is before the
so,
era of cell phones where you could like kind of lean under your desk and say, I think there's a fire over at the
yeah,
hospital.
I did not have
Never
that
did that.
option.
That'd
It
be
was just a
bad.
loud horn. And so, I think I both early on, uh, would encounter economics and find it very fascinating because to me it just felt like I was a very curious person and it was a way
Yeah.
to understand how the world worked and how systems worked. But I do understand there are ways that people encounter the economy, topics related to money, to the economy and economics that can be like not the most thrilling. And so certainly I've tried to always, I hope there are not people ever, reading or listening to things I've produced and hoping a small fire would break out. And I'd like
Right.
to think I've cleared
I
that
think
bar
you're safe. I
consistently.
think you're safe. The
Thank
book
you.
is a really extraordinary read. I want to
Thank you.
start at the beginning, and that is you have chosen not to talk about the economy in a for-profit context. Like mostly people think of like corporations and retailers and home builders and supply and demand curves and all that. It begins with a story about food banks and how they are using the principles of Economics 101 to improve services for those dealing with food insecurity. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely an intentional choice to maybe kind of like show people that we were aiming to do something a bit different here and expand their conception of what economics is. Um, and like economics is really about scarce resources and how we allocate them and how we get the most use out of what we have. And that's what exactly was going on with um, these food banks, where there was kind of like a national network um, that would get large donations. Let's say maybe like General Mills had a lot of extra product, and so they donated it, or other companies might do the same. And then this, kind of national organization was connected to all these local food banks and would try and figure out like, okay, where should we send the surplus of, you know, peanut butter or cereal or pickles? Um, and they had this problem that one of my colleagues geniusly kind of titled the pickle problem, which is, you had this food banker in Alaska, who you meet in the first chapter of the book, who got offered this huge donation of pickles, and she's like, ah. Because
Pickles.
the food bankers kind of like in national HQ, they thought like, well, it's hard to get fresh produce to Alaska, but so pickles are probably great, right?
Ah,
And she was like, oh, they're going to be, like my families don't really like pickles. They're going to be these like huge containers, and because of food safety regulations, I can't repackage them into small like family size. So like, who's going to want like a gigantic like 3x a Costco size pickle container? And what like the people at HQ didn't know she'd set up this whole system so she could get, say, a shipment of fresh fruits or produce from California or where have you in the lower 48 shipped to Alaska in a timely way and quite affordably. And so she actually ended up on a task force with other food bankers, as well as a number of economists from the University of Chicago, who they
mm.
had invited to see if they could help them figure out a better way to allocate these donations to where they would kind of do the most good. And these Chicago economists, they're hearing about this and they get kind of excited. They're like, this is Econ 101. You are like, I don't think they said it exactly this way. Now I'm kind of putting some words in their mouth in a hopefully helpful way. They're like, they basically are saying like, you are kind of in like Russia before the fall of the Soviet Union, where a small group of bureaucrats in Moscow are making decisions for everyone, but they lack all this information that's in the heads of people all over the country. That's kind of what's going on. You have this small group of people, very well meaning, but lacking in information at the national headquarters. So therefore, like the food and donations are not going to the most effective places. And so, that there was this kind of feeling of like, tear down this wall. How could we use economics to allocate donations more effectively and really benefit all these families?
I love that you referenced the Russian thing because there's this incredibly visual story of Boris Yeltsin touring a supermarket and effectively seeing all the choice available to American consumers and thinking, I don't know so much about communism because I'd like four kinds of ketchup like they have here. I want to segue to a chapter that has particular resonance for Canadians, and that is the phone at the end of the world includes really interesting discussion about tariffs. If we separate the political dynamic that's going on the tariff front and look at it really through the lens of the economy and the economic principles, what does history help us understand about what's going on the tariff front today?
Yeah, I mean, I think our chapter looks at this really compelling case study of when, you had a political leader who said, we need to build things in this country again. We want, all these international companies selling us products. We want them to build those products here at home and create great manufacturing jobs. And this was President Kirchner in Argentina. Um, but I think like it probably sounds very familiar to today. Um, and so I think, it's understandable that like a lot of people, a lot of political leaders might think like they might look at, say, like a town that used to have this great manufacturing sector. They had all these factories that produce great jobs that then, kind of have moved away and say like, oh, let's bring that back. Um, but this is chapter was really a case study of how difficult that is,
Mm.
because what happened in Argentina is through a combination of kind of carrots and sticks. Argentina and the president pushed BlackBerry, which was then the maker back in early 2000s of the most popular smartphone, really the first popular smartphone, to make BlackBerry phones in Argentina, and not just in Argentina, but in this like tiny town so far south. It's actually a place where people would leave from their port to go to like Antarctica. So very, very remote, right? Like not the place you would think is the natural, oh, there must be so many engineers there, perfect place to
Right.
manufacture smartphones. And so it was this huge effort to kind of like for one politician or one government to really kind of like demand a better deal from globalization and kind of bend the global economy to their will. And for a time, it actually succeeded. Like BlackBerry worked with a local company there, or local companies there. They're putting this like state of the art factory in that can like track pieces of dust. I don't know super the technical specifics, but they're doing amazing things like making sure tracking tiny
Right.
pieces of dust so they don't get in the phones or whatever. And they produce a smartphone, and it's this amazing triumphant moment. All the politicians come for the photo ops. The people who work on the line there are so proud. But then the problem they had is, making the phone there costs so much more, all the transit costs, trying to get really really good engineers to come to this super remote place with very little housing. They had to offer so much more money. And so the phone they produced was quite good by any normal standards, but like that's not enough to compete in the global economy. Their phone was more expensive and it was out of date compared to smartphones you could get, even just Blackberries you could get elsewhere. So, Argentinians preferred to buy a BlackBerry that someone smuggled in their socks or suitcase from abroad because it was cheaper and better. And so that plant shut down, and that kind of happened across the Argentinian economy. And they had, all this manufacturing boom really went bust. They had high inflation because all these not importing cheaper products from elsewhere made all their local ones were more expensive. Um, so I think it's this really cautionary tale about how tariffs, it doesn't mean we should always just like accept the status quo and never try to, get a better deal for people, make sure that the economic outcomes are fair. But it shows that like tariffs can be like how they can really fail as a tool
Yeah.
if your specific goals are, we're going to create all these manufacturing jobs. If,
Yeah.
it might just be that, yeah, 30 years ago you were great at manufacturing a certain type of product, but the world has changed and you
Yeah.
can't bring back that world where the entire country will want to buy from you and you'll be
They
able to
can
do
misallocate those
for sure, for
scarce
sure.
resources. You have a whole section in the book on work and career. I have no ability to be objective on the question of remote work. I have been a remote worker for a very, very long, like probably like 18 years. I run my organization as a remote friendly hybrid. When you look at the economics of that, and again, trying to get park the political side of it, or park the political to the side, what did you learn? What do your stories say about remote work?
Wait, I'm curious. Are you a booster of remote work? Are you
Oh,
trying to?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
I have a
Yeah.
child. I like to work out. I make the meals. If I had to go into an office every single day, the entire house of cards that my life is built on would collapse in
Yeah.
minutes.
I mean, what I wrote about in the book and have experienced myself, and I think many people have probably experienced themselves, is that what's frustrating about remote work is that it would be really nice if there was one answer. It's better or it's not, or at least that would be nice and simple. But instead, there's a series of trade offs. And in some situations, it might have more benefits than others. And even more annoyingly, it might be the case sometimes, right, that like, well, there are more benefits maybe for management than for the employees, or vice versa, of one situation or the other. I think the two biggest trade offs are probably, right, like on the one hand, a lot of studies have found that for lots of types of work, people will be more productive in the sense that without the distractions of an office, they just get more done. You're not being distracted. There's not that, person clearing their throat in a weird way that always annoys you across the room, or like whatever your office thing is, like that's not there. You can focus, at least in many cases when people have
I
a
was
nice
trying to do the most
road set up.
annoying throat clearing that I could. I feel like I failed you and I apologize. I'll come up with
Yeah,
something better.
yeah,
Maybe I could
uh,
grind my teeth or something.
yeah, yeah. Microwave some fish, but
Yeah.
we're not in the same spot right now. But and so like, but that comes at these other two types of kind of productivity or important parts of work, which one is mentorship, right? There's studies looking at how like, oh yeah, all these senior engineers were a lot more productive when they could work remote, but then like the new hires, the young engineers didn't get to like interrupt them, somewhat annoyingly perhaps, and ask them questions, but then get better, right? So that's kind of a hit on the entire organization. That means that you don't get to like train new and younger people. And the other part is innovation, which is always hard to track. But I do think there's been some really great and interesting research about how, um, you know, at least for now, there are so many benefits to being in person for innovation, creativity, large and small. Coming up, the kind of like fable of this or fairy tale that I think does happen is, either at drinks after work or like bumping into someone at the water cooler, you kind of have an offhand conversation and you come up with some new idea for your work for the company. And that's something that is a cost, but there are all these benefits to remote work, people saving hours of time, it being so much easier, especially for young parents, where you have, like huge benefits for parents who might otherwise drop out of the workforce,
Yeah.
but are able to make it all work with remote work, like et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of those hard things where it's just these trade-offs.
Yeah. But a
Um,
cognizance of them and clear thinking on what those trade-offs are and how to mitigate them on both sides. You
yeah.
also have a section in the book on love and family. My husband and I have decided we're never getting divorced because neither of us would ever be willing to date online. That seems to be a marketplace of near universal.
That's the real utility of dating apps
It's
is just making
100%.
sure people in good marriages having a little squabble are like, oh, this is
Would you
would we
listen?
prefer to
I
go on
am
dating apps or
better.
just, like load the
I am better
dishwasher
than you having
correctly?
to go to a dating app. No matter what, I save you. But that's an example of a market in which it's a very efficient market from an economics perspective. And you can find almost anything you want. There's a million apps out there, so I hear. You write about something called the stable marriage problem, which
Hmm.
provides like a new take on dating and marriage and relationships. Give us the essence of that story and what it says about the times we're in from a dating standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I think economists often like um, kind of getting insights by looking at kind of like a smaller model of an economy or the problem they're thinking about. There's often an island, right? Because then you can kind of simplify things. And that's the case here. The stable marriage problem, it's this kind of thought experiment, but then with a lot of math behind it too, to prove out the ideas. But the intuitive idea is like, imagine there's an island and there are like, 12 people on it, six men and six women. And in this case, they're straight. And, they're all interested in matching up, getting married or matching up. What would be like the best way for them to match up? Um, and the answer that economists came up with and can be proved out mathematically is that what you would do is you would have, like, say, all the men, you know, go, propose or ask out the person they're most interested in. Or you can imagine them like almost making a ranking of like who they're
Right.
most interested in romantically. And there are these kind of like rounds of proposals. And, so the men go and kind of like propose. The women select of the proposal they get, the person they're most interested in. Those two become a couple. All the people who aren't coupled yet do this again and again until everyone's coupled up. And at the end of it, um, it's this kind of stable match, stable equilibrium, because no one is in a couple where, like, if they left, they would be able to go, achieve a better outcome for themselves. They've kind of achieved the best possible match. There is an interesting twist to this, though, that there's a huge asterisk, which is that it's the side doing the asking that gets their best possible outcome. So if it's the men doing the asking, they will get their best possible match because they're going and proposing, asking the woman they're most interested in. The women will not necessarily. So like the Sadie Hawkins dance is perhaps was maybe very had a intuitive grasp of these economics and the stable marriage problem, right? By suggesting that women go ask out the guy this time. Um, but a lot of to a surprising extent that surprised me before I knew about this, like a lot of these dating apps, like they are marketplaces, as we talked about, the algorithm is often based on economic research like the stable marriage problem. Um, and so I do think it could be quite helpful to kind of understand what's going on under the hood of these dating apps, which often is like economic research that is trying to help. Although often economists have critiques. There's a lot of like economic principles you can use to critique dating apps as well, for sure, that keep them from being efficient and probably pleasant for
Yeah.
people.
Well, what I'm thinking about is it's almost like you should monetize the end result. So the app is only paid on a successful marriage, because then it would seem like you'd do a better job genuinely matching them. Like this example where you've got I'm going to marry you in 30 years. Um, and it would sell the harder to place candidates on the app. Like the app would suggest new photos or filter them. It would use AI to make them sound more interesting. It would use AI to modify the chats so they sounded gregarious and charismatic. I think I'm onto something. I
Yeah.
now
I
have
mean,
my new
what I
side.
will say is that, I talked to economists who pointed out that like the stable marriage problem and the kind of algorithm that's used to solve it has been used, for example, to match like high school students to the public school they want to attend, for example, and has had quite impressive results. And he pointed out that the problem with dating apps is that like usually all these cases where economists have helped use this algorithm and approach to solve a problem, there's no one really been in the no one really involved in kind of setting up this market has just been trying to make money, right? Like the economists helping out the public schools and the students, like there's no money exchanging hands for the public
Mm.
schools. There's no profit modem. Whereas, for these dating apps, they're for-profit businesses trying to make money. So their incentives, what might be ideal for matching people up is not necessarily ideal for having a strong business, because if you just really efficiently match people up and then they leave your site, like how are you going to make money? You need them staying on the app to look at advertisements or to keep paying for more messages per month, or whatever exactly the business model is. So I do think people should, I mean, I think people are very skeptical of dating apps. There's a lot of pessimism about them, and I think it's often warranted. There should be skepticism because, yeah, they don't necessarily have aligned incentives with their customers at all times.
One last question before we go. We've only got a minute. I chose the examples that resonated most for me. What is the Easter egg of the story or the example or the economic concept that resonates most for you?
I think one for me is thinking about the superstar effect. I keep coming back to a lot, and whether it affects your industry. It's this idea, right, that like technology has enabled people in certain sectors to have outcomes like, you know, the average musician does not make a lot of money. They have like a day job to support their music. But Taylor Swift makes a ton of money because she serves like almost the entire market. There are more and more industries, sectors, professions that are like that. And so I think it's quite helpful to think about like, do I want to be in a sector with the superstar effect where if I work really, really hard, the rewards will be huge? Or maybe if I really value work-life balance, maybe I want a job more like nursing or sales where, it's not like there are only, 100 nurses in the world who make all the money and all the other
Yeah.
nurses like are scrabbling to get by. So I think that's a quite powerful insight that in the book comes, we explain through the story of Desi Arnaz of I Love Lucy fame, a
Oh,
chapter I
it's a
definitely talk about with my
fascinating
mother.
story. It's a fascinating story. Okay, everybody should just go read the book because that story in
Please.
itself is worth the price of admission. Alex, thank you for joining us today to talk about the book.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.
Alex Mayyasi is author of Planet Money, a guide to the economic forces that shape your life, based on the podcast, but its own separate, distinct, and super compelling thing. Worth the read.